My grandfather was a survivor of the Titanic. I now know the horrifying reason it sank. Whenever I asked my grandfather what happened on the Titanic, he'd always start panicking and shout at me, telling me to never bring it up again, almost like he was hiding something. 2 days ago, when I asked him for the third time, he made me promise to never tell anyone what actually happened. I was only 7 years old when I got on the Titanic, he began. It was so big compared to me, and I was struck by how beautiful everything looked. It was one of the happiest days of my life, but deep down, I couldn't shake this feeling that something about the Titanic was horribly wrong. The second day is when things started to go wrong. I began to notice some strange behavior from some of the other passengers. They were coughing a lot, and their eyes were very red. My dad told me it was nothing, but I can remember how scared he looked. He left for a few minutes and came back carrying a wrench, telling me it was just for protection. I woke up the next morning to screams coming from the next room. I jumped out of bed and rushed to see what was happening. There was already a group of people standing outside the door, and I pushed them aside to get a better view. I froze while staring at the room. A man was lying on the floor with his stomach ripped open while his 2 babies were feasting on his intestines. I was shoved out of the way as 2 of the crew rushed in. They grabbed the kids and struggled to hold them as they acted like rabid animals. They injected them with sleeping liquid, and they were out cold. We all went back to our rooms so they could clean up the mess. That day, as I wandered the ship, I noticed a lot of people seemed very sick. The crew told everyone the sickness spreading around had nothing to do with the cannibalism and that there was no need to panic. They were so wrong. On the 4th day, I woke up to hear screams and running outside the cabin. I peeked outside and was shocked to see the hallway covered in blood, with bodies spread throughout the floor. I quickly closed the door and went to wake up my parents, but they were missing. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to leave the room, but also afraid to stay alone. My stomach finally convinced me to leave and find some food. I slowly walked to the door and peeked out, happy to find the hall empty. There were distant sounds of the engines rumbling and the occasional scream. I remembered there was a kitchen down the hallway where I might find something to eat. It took an eternity to move down the corridor, trying to avoid stepping in blood or blood-stained clothes. I reached the kitchen and almost puked when I saw the corpses inside. It looked like someone had stabbed them hundreds of times. Some were crew members, others were passengers. I grabbed an apple and left as fast as I could. I quickly ate and began to search the ship. I saw so many corpses with their stomachs ripped open. By night, I started to worry that everyone else on board was dead. As I was walking, I heard distant gunshots and wondered what was going on. Then suddenly, the ship shook violently as it hit a giant lump of ice. Ice crashed down next to me, forcing me to move away. I saw my father in the distance and ran toward him, but I stopped when I noticed his clothes were soaked in blood. His eyes locked on mine. He looked like an animal, not like my father. He let out a giant growl and started charging at me. I knew what was going to happen, but my father was suddenly shot by a crew member right before he could get to me. He told me his name was Arthur and that he was looking for his son. He moved quickly, barely giving me time to keep up. We passed dozens of corpses until we reached an area with survivors. Some were lowering lifeboats. Others were fighting off passengers who had turned into monsters. Arthur stayed behind to make sure everyone got into the last lifeboat. As we ran to board, I heard screaming. It was Arthur's son. He rushed back, telling me to go. I watched in horror as he was torn apart, but his sacrifice allowed us to escape. From the lifeboat, I could see the Titanic sinking. People were running, attacking each other, and falling into the freezing water. I turned away, unable to watch anymore. We were rescued hours later. I found out my mother had survived on another lifeboat.